Welcome again, ladies. I'm so thankful that each one of you are here. I hope you enjoyed that delicious meal. One of the things we do at Each Living Intentionally is bless you also we have two gifts to give away tonight. So we put all of the names from the name tags in this basket, and we're going to see who the lucky winners are. No, we can't. That's all right. Staff can't win these.
Annette's not even in here. She doesn't even know.
Perfect. Kim Glenna. Yay. Okay. Kim, come on down and get your gift. Come on down. Sure, you can. Okay. Okay. And Darla Johnson. No, she doesn't. No, you don't want it, Darla? Oh, goodness. Okay. She's married to staff. Okay. Natalie Kasimba. Yay! All right, where's Natalie? There she is in red. All right. I'm going to turn it over to Leah.
Well, everyone, I'm Leah. I'm the worship pastor here, and Jana gave me the privilege of introducing our speaker for tonight. Jenna Soul is someone that I have served with now for, I don't know, we're getting up there, 10 years, but the amount of time that I have led worship with her can almost be tripled by the amount of time that she has led worship at this church. If there's anything that you love about the worship culture in this community, Jenna is a big part of it, and you can thank her for her faithfulness through the seasons. Jenna is, I just love you, Jenna. She's full of integrity. She is super honest, and she carries herself with grace and style, and she prays a lot. Would you just join me in welcoming her?
Hi everybody. I'm usually up here singing with an earpiece in, so this is great. I am excited to be here, and when Jana asked me to speak, she asked me to think about a theme for my talk, and I kept coming back to hope in the waiting. Many of you know that we spent much of 2023 dealing with the reality of Jay's cancer, and literally all we could do is pray and hope and wait and pray and hope that the treatment would work, that the side effects would be manageable, that the cancer wouldn't spread in the meantime, that we would sense God's peace in this storm and wait on God's timing. So how do we stay hopeful in the midst of waiting and in the middle of life's toughest circumstances? Well, I am grateful to be on this side of that experience. I was very grateful to be able to flip the calendar to 2024, and just really I'm humbled to be here to share the story of how God demonstrated his love for me during our dark season of trial and gave me hope in the waiting. And there's so much that happened over the past year. I better jump in and get started. And I've spent a lot of time, writing and editing and wordsmithing. And finally, I'm like, I have to just take my hands off it and trust you, God, that you are going to use this for however it's meant to be. So let's just pray for a second. Dear Lord Jesus, thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you for all the women that you've brought here. And Lord, I just thank you for this time. I thank you for this time that we can gather. And Father, I thank you for this story. This is not my story. This is your story that I am going to tell. And Lord, I just pray now that you will use my words, use the events, and just use everything to point to you and how you work and how you provide hope. And so I ask that you would just bless this time, Jesus. It's in your name. Amen. Okay, so it's very surreal to even be here compared to where we were last year at this time. So let me just pause and back up for a minute, because I know that some of you may not know who I am. So I will provide just a little bit of background. I have been attending Woodridge for almost 3 decades. I've been married to Jay. It'll be 28 years. And we met at Woodridge way back when. It was meeting in a conference center nearby. This building was under construction, and it was Spring Hill Conference Center. And it's now called Spring Hill Golf Club. But that's where we met. It was awkward. It was on this long hallway, and we met for the first time in this very forced, awkward meeting, and then we met for a second time, and he asked me out right on the spot. So, anyway, and then, oh, here we are, yes, the photo. Yeah, we've been serving together on the music team, and Paul has been part of it the entire time, so... So we've been serving together on the music team our entire marriage and have shared many wonderful memories and experiences over the years. We have also developed our own special language on stage. You know, you get that chemistry when you've been on stage with somebody, when you're like when you're on the road with somebody for a long time, and where we can just literally just lock eyes and for a special moment and think about how blessed we are to serve together. And no, we don't ever do that. And also just shoot a similar but very different look to each other that says, like, where in the world did you come up with that line? Or those are not the right words, or you are going to the wrong place in the song, or you are off the beat. Like, that can all be communicated by the same look. And Leah, you've seen that look. You've witnessed it. Yes. Yep. But it has been a wonderful gift to be able to serve together on the music team this entire time. And we have 2 kids, Connor and Allie. They attend Bethel University. Connor is a senior, and we just paid his last tuition bill. Yay! And Allie is a sophomore. And in addition to serving at Woodridge, I spend a lot of time helping Jay at the businesses that he owns. Alan Alma's Supper Club and Charters on Lake Minnetonka, and I also work in full-time in corporate marketing, and have worked in marketing for most of my adult life. And so at various seasons throughout the different seasons of our family. And I currently serve as a mentor mom on Wednesday nights, and thank you to my group that's here tonight. And I don't know what happened so fast, because I remember bringing Connor and Allie to Moms in Step on Thursday mornings when they were 2 and 4 years old. And now they are 22 and 20. And one area of my life that I'm particularly passionate about is community impact and giving back. And I currently serve as a board chair for the organization Every Meal. And that's an organization that Woodridge supports. It's the organization that provides bags of food that are placed in kids' backpacks, and it's just a passion of mine. It's a wonderful organization. And so that's me. And here's a photo of us. The next photo should be of us maybe at a family wedding this fall. So this is a current photo of us. And kind of a little bit about my background. I've been a follower of Jesus since I was 5, and I went forward to accept Jesus into my heart and also accept that Bible-shaped piggy bank at Vacation Bible School. It was like a package. Throughout my childhood, there were various seasons where I was closer to God, growing in my faith, especially following those mountaintop moments, such as church camp or the youth retreats or the lock-ins. And as I got older, there were also seasons of extreme selfishness where I had nearly, didn't care much about my faith and instead lived for my friends and the world and the weekend parties. But growing up, I can say now, looking back, my parents gave me the greatest gifts that I could ever receive. That of the gift of growing up in a safe and loving home, and also the gift of introducing me to Jesus. And my mom is here tonight, so I'm going to embarrass her and point her out. Yep. Yay. Looking back, really, a solid foundation was built while I was home. And so all the heavy lifting you're doing, moms, bringing your kids here to stuff, getting them involved, that's all very, very important in building that foundation. But it wasn't really until I left home, really, when it finally became real to me that it was my faith, trusting in the Lord, until I left home and went to college. But here's a couple throwbacks. It's the 40th anniversary of the Cabbage Patch Kids, so I had to throw this one in here. That must be, and the monogram sweater. I just want everyone to point out. I hit the jack. Look at those bangs. That is a work of art. That is like a masterpiece. I'm sure I was very proud of those bangs at that moment, and probably used a lot of Salon Selectives or Aquanet to make that happen. So, anyway, okay, moving on. So, I was at Bethel. I went to college. I went to Bethel, and Jay went to the U. And Jay and I were introduced during the winter of our senior year by a mutual friend. That friend was serving with Jay here at on the music team, but also she was with me in the Bethel choir. So that's how she knew us and introduced us. And after we started dating, then later that year we got engaged, and we got married in 1996 and spent a few years as a young married couple. And I spent some of that time, I went to grad school. Jay went through a brief motorcycle phase. No pictures, sorry, don't have any. And then we set out to start a family. And we got pregnant right away, only to experience the devastating loss of a miscarriage shortly thereafter. And then that was really our first real season of waiting, until we were blessed with our son, Connor, and then 2 years later, our daughter, Allie. And, you know, we went through so many seasons growing up with our kids. Some of you are moms, and you understand all the seasons you go through. It takes on many sub-seasons, like the infant years, when the biggest milestones are when you celebrate your little ones can hold a bottle all by themselves, or then, like, if you get a trophy from getting through the potty training phase. Or when you can finally take a family vacation and everyone can go to the bathroom on their own, sleep on their own, and maybe carry their backpack on their own. That's huge. This is huge. And then the birthday party season. Who's in the birthday party season? Like every weekend there's a birthday party. Yeah. And then the youth sports season. That's a very long one. And then there was a brief slime making season in our house. And then the light at the end of the tunnel. You see glimpses of what's ahead, because they are starting to do things on their own, and they become drivers, and they drive themselves to their own activities. And then that light at the end of the tunnel, it becomes a constant burning reminder of what is ahead. They will be graduating high school soon, and you have mixed feelings about all of it. But what an absolutely full season that has been. So many laughs and talks and joys and heartbreaks, and your heart just takes a beating as it goes through all of it as we're raising our kids. But perhaps you're not a parent, and maybe you're a proud auntie or a proud honorary parent or grandparent. Then you've been able to witness all of that from a safe and comfortable distance. So here's a picture of us from the early years. This is at my parents' house. We would spend every Christmas Eve at my parents'. Our kids would come with us while we sang at 5 services, and they were unaccounted for and unsupervised for about 6 hours. And we all lived to tell about it, so, all right. And then one day they actually do the thing that you both dread and you're excited about at the same time. They leave and head off to their next adventure. For our kids, this was college. And so during the fall of 2022, we were just entering a new season, that empty nest season, and all that the season had to offer us. And I remember that fall so well as we settled into this new season of life. I had even taken on a new professional challenge with a new job as a marketing VP, and it was exciting in my career. It felt like the right time to do that, given our extra margin as empty nesters. And we'll put a pin in that detail right now. I'll come back to it. But little did we know the season we were about to enter, and that's the season of waiting. It was early December of 2022, and we had dinner plans at the home of some friends. It was a lovely, carefree evening where Jay and I were free to visit as long as we wanted because we weren't under a time frame. There were no kids. No one needed to be picked up. It was glorious. And the next morning, Jay had a doctor appointment with his general physician where he brought some questions. And that turned into a follow-up appointment with a specialist. And then there were tests, and then there were scans, and more appointments. And we were starting to see the picture come to life, just like the pictures from those old Polaroid cameras. We have one in the back. And what was showing wasn't looking good. In fact, it was developing into something very bleak and unbelievable, really. Here's my first journal entry on this topic. I'm a big journal writer, and it's just how I process things. So you'll hear some of that tonight. We did not know what it was definitively yet, but we knew it wasn't good. So here's what I wrote. Whatever happens from this point on, we won't see the world the same ever again. I'm holding on to hope that God has a plan and that he is orchestrating all things and circumstances so that we can learn to trust him fully, to take our hands off the wheel and allow him to work through us, so that in the end, through whatever circumstances or outcome, we can point back to God and see how he worked, so that we can point to his grace, his mercy, his faithfulness, his unending love for us. And I know in this world, we will have trouble, but take heart. He has overcome the world. And that's John 16:33. There were more tests and then evaluations and follow-up appointments. And by Christmas of 2022, we had received the official news. Jay was diagnosed with colon cancer, stage 3B. What? I mean, Jay, to know Jay, here are some facts about Jay. He's a lifelong non-drinker, non-smoker. He works out 3 times a week with a trainer. He's an active lifestyle kind of guy. So his job, he's running around all the time. So to receive this news was not only incomprehensible, really, but it was so baffling. Why? Why him? And how? So many questions were swirling around in our heads. In my strongest moments, I was like, okay, so this is our story now. So I guess this is what God has planned for us. Everyone has something they're dealing with, and this is going to be ours. And how will the story go? How are we supposed to live this out? Do this right? Like we were supposed to know how to do this the right way. And like God pulled a trial down from his shelf of trials and gave this one to us like it was some test. And hey, Jay and Jenna, here's your trial. How are you going to do this? Are you going to handle it right? But in my fear-filled moments, which were often, it was more like, how in the world can this be our reality? God never promised a perfect life, perfect, easy life, but he does promise that he will never leave us or forsake us. Deuteronomy 31:6-8 reminds us to be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified, for the Lord your God goes with you, and he will never leave you or forsake you. So was I going to choose to believe God's word and choose to actually believe God? In a follow-up journal entry at the end of December, I wrestled with all of these questions, such as, what will God show us? How can we point back to God's plan? And how will God use this? And how will God teach us? What will he teach us? how will God change us? I had all these questions like, why were we going through this? Like, why were you giving this to us, God? And that journal entry was during a time where I was feeling particularly hopeful and optimistic. It was very, Romans 8:28-ish. As we know that in all things God works together for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. I knew enough about God and how he works to know this wasn't a punishment, but it was something that God had allowed for a reason. So I was faced with the choice to believe that God really is working all things together for good and could rest in the assurance that he has a plan, or try to manage this on my own strength. Managing it my way might work for a little while, but what about when that season of waiting gets really long and dark? And so while that particular journal entry was hopeful, and believe me, or maybe it didn't sound hopeful, but they were not all that way. One of my late journal entries started out like this in December, like when it was all just kind of hitting us. It starts out, how I wish for and long for the innocence of 2 weeks ago, before we knew anything, when I was oblivious to what was happening, when the stress of 2 weeks ago seems pretty trivial now, like when I couldn't tie the ribbon around the flowers that we were bringing to the party. I wish I could be transported back to early December. And then another journal entry started like this. Maybe if I don't write the word, that will keep it from actually being real. But it is real. An hour-long appointment today with Jay's new oncologist confirmed that this is very much real. And the reality of the situation was setting in for Jay, too. He wondered how everything else was going to continue while he's going through this. How bad were the side effects going to be? What if the treatment just isn't working? We didn't know the answers to any of these questions. All we could do at this point is just hope and wait for treatment to begin and pray for God's healing mercy and wait and hope that the treatment would be effective. And during this time, though, we did receive some really good news. Based on the scans and his MRI, there was no cancer anywhere else. The tumor wasn't angry, meaning it was more likely to be the kind that does respond well to treatment, and the tumor was slow growing. So more appointments and the treatment plan came together, but those appointments with the specialists were scary and overwhelming, as they explained not only how the treatment would be designed to attack the cancer, but the long list of short-term and long-term side effects that come along with this treatment plan. And we were trusting in the wisdom of the doctors and in the medicine, but we also knew we needed to place our trust in God to just carry us through this season, and when we did not know the outcome. The doctors give you percentages of success rates, but that's just data. Once again, I was reminded about God's truth and his promise to never leave us, to never forsake us. And I say that I believe in God, but do I believe God and believe that his word is true in these moments? Did I really believe that he will not leave me or forsake me when we are walking through this? Early on, I remember clearly Jay saying, we don't have to make this a big deal. We don't have to share this broadly and draw attention to ourselves, and other people are going through stuff too. And at that point, I just wasn't in the headspace to debate it, because as much as I was in disbelief of our reality, it still felt like I was an innocent bystander in all of this, because it still didn't compare to Jay's situation, that of actually living with it. But then days later, once we had shared the news with our kids and our immediate families, I could sense something happening with Jay. Jay wanted to meet with some close friends and mentors to pray with them, so we opened the circle up a little bit. And then a week or so after that, Jay said, I've shared with Paul, Pastor Paul, and I think we should meet with him. And our meeting, Paul asked if he could share with Darla. And Jay was in disbelief. He said in a panic, you mean you haven't shared with Darla yet? And Paul said, well, no, you asked me to keep it private. And Jay was downright panicking, because those of you who know Darla know she's an amazing prayer warrior. And And in a panic, he said, well, of course you can share it with Darla. Now we're already behind 2 weeks on Darla's prayer support. And then Paul asked if he could share it with the Woodridge community, and that felt scary, to make ourselves vulnerable. Even though we're on stage on a regular basis, that felt safe. It feels familiar, and this did not feel familiar. And I expected Jay to just politely decline and say, no, that's okay, we'll share it selectively with others. But instead, it was a resounding yes. If sharing it means that one more person might pray for me, I will take it. And that really, to me, signaled a shift in Jay's heart and how we were going to approach this together. He was beginning to realize the gravity of the situation for himself and to deal with his own fear, but he wasn't going to try and handle it himself, to muscle through on his own strength. And he desired to have a community around him to support and lift him up and to lift us up. And thankfully he did, because God calls us to be in community and to draw upon that community during our times of need. And we would need those prayers during some very dark times. That Sunday in January when Paul asked us to stand up in front of the entire church, it was both terrifying to know that we were now letting everyone in on our secret, but also brought such relief. We didn't have to try and put on our game faces to fake it. We could be real with the brothers and sisters of our church community and who we serve alongside with and worship with every Sunday. And just a little PSA, I would highly encourage anyone who's going through anything to literally just share it, release it. There is just something so powerful. And we have an amazing prayer team here that meets and prays and receives all these requests and prays confidentially. And the act of just releasing that prayer request out among our community just felt like such a weight had been lifted. And that's also being obedient to just not keep it to ourselves. So don't be afraid to tap into our community when you're going through something. So then the treatment began. The first phase of treatment began right in January when Jay went to radiation appointments Monday through Friday and took chemo pills on those days. He had 30 rounds of radiation, so this phase lasted 6 weeks. The first week seemed to be going fine. We both were like, you can handle this radiation. And then it got really bad very quickly. The realities of this treatment started to set in, and there were some days that it took all he had to be able to function. Imagine getting the worst sunburn of your life. Just imagine what that's like. I'm sure we've all done that, where we've had just a scalding, raw sunburn. And then imagine going out in the sun day after day on that same place and exposing it to more sun. That is how he described radiation. But he still went to work every day and powered through. But that meant when he got home, he didn't have much left. No words, not a lot of emotional capacity. And that made for just a pretty lonely time for me at times. And in addition, it was winter, it was cold. We actually had a decent winter last year. It was dark. And I just really longed to know how he was feeling, not just physically, but emotionally. And he just didn't have much energy to talk. And I know, a lot of times it's hard to get our husbands to open up. And I just was like, okay, you need to give me here's a sentence, complete the sentence. I feel. And it was hard. It was like I was trying to connect with him. So all we could do is wait and hope and release prayer requests out to our community over big group texts and pray with all my might that the radiation was doing what it was supposed to be doing day in and day out. But watching him endure this pain, I felt just completely helpless. And at one point, he drove himself to the ER in the middle of the night to deal with some difficult side effects of the radiation. And I was desperate to find a way to support him. I wanted to be able to do something. I couldn't just stand and just watch him go through this. One day, Jay gave me an idea. It certainly wasn't going to make his physical pain go away, but maybe lift his spirits. So this is something goofy. Jay shared this, that when he opens up, this is goofy. I have permission to share. When he opens up a new deodorant, he has this moment of reflection, and he thinks about, like, where am I going to go with the next, 4 to 6 weeks while I'm using this deodorant and this particular stick. And so, yep. And once again, as he opened up a new deodorant, he's like, wow, the next 6 weeks should be pretty interesting. And with this one, trying to add some humor. And so that gave me a brilliant idea. I took the brand new deodorant that he had just opened and designed a little inspirational message on it, since it was something that he would look at every day, and it was a tangible way that I could serve him. And it was very deeply profound, yes. So these deodorant devotionals continued throughout his treatment. And while I was feeling mostly, I think there is an actual photo of some of these. Oh yeah. So while I was feeling mostly helpless and useless through this was something that I could do to encourage him. And so he still has those. They were just verses that, spoke to me at the time. But then February came around, and it brought more dark winter days of waiting. A journal entry from that time reads just simply, FOMO, lonely. Those are some of the feelings I'm feeling right now during this season. And it wasn't all the time, but it was certainly any time people talked about future events, future trips, vacations, anything future focused was unknown for us. We just didn't know what life was going to be like in 2 months, in 6 months. I was growing weary from the waiting and the hoping, and sometimes my prayers were just blatant cries out to God, and also some desperate texts out to friends to pray for us. And during this time, there were some verses that really I just clung to. Isaiah 40:31, but those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. And the one that I keep coming back to, that is the theme for tonight. We wait in hope for the Lord. He is our help and our shield. In him our hearts rejoice, for we trust in his holy name. And may your unfailing love rest upon us, O Lord, even as we put our hope in you. And then one from Psalm 33:18. No king is saved by the size of his army. No warrior escapes by his great strength. A horse is a vain hope for deliverance. Despite all its great strength, it cannot save. But the eyes of the Lord are on those who fear him, on those whose hope is in his unfailing love. Well, it was also during this time that we started to really experience firsthand how our family and friends and this community really loved God through loving us. Whether it was a text or a card in the mail or a special treat dropped off, we had a close circle of friends in our family who would offer to bring over meals. And we didn't need meals. It was just the two of us. But it wasn't the meal itself that we needed. It was the act of bringing it over and the opportunity to just spend time with that friend or family member who dropped it off. And it was just such a welcome connection in a dark winter, those dark winter months. And in addition, our Woodridge community really came around us in powerful ways. There's so many examples, from Sarah, who provided us with this booklet that helped her through her own cancer journey, to Mary, who provided skin products that helped lessen some of the side effects of the radiation, to Sherry, who hand knit the blanket, the hug from God, and prayed for Jay the whole time she was knitting it. Or Anna, who would bake amazing treats and drop them off at our house. We received cards and special gifts in the mail throughout Jay's treatment, and I was grateful for every single one. We were touched. We were moved to tears at times. And it's not that we needed anything. We didn't need the gift cards. But it was just the simple act of kindness and knowing that people were thinking of us and that people were praying for us. And it was just such a much-needed day brightener. And many of you are out there, and I know that so many were praying for us. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for following through on a prompting from God, or just thank you for taking the time to do that. It was huge. And, just if you know somebody that is going through something, don't overthink it. Just don't assume that somebody else has got them covered. Just reach out, send a text, an email. Don't wait for the meal train to be organized. Just do something. Just reach out to them, because it's in those moments that your caring makes such a difference. It certainly did for us. As we neared the end of February, the radiation phase of Jay's treatment wrapped up, and then he went on a 2-week break. So once again, we found ourselves just waiting, praying and waiting in hope. Choosing to wait in hope. And those weeks were long, and the enemy can really mess with you during those dark, lonely times. And I battled, loneliness and immense inadequacy for how to serve Jay during this season. And I sent out more desperate texts to all the group texts I was on, asking for prayers. I started gathering all the verses I could about hope and just focusing on them. I wrote them all down in a notebook and would just review them in the mornings just to kind of ponder them and let them soak in. I brought a little sign and hung it in my office that simply read hope, where I could see it every day. And these were some of the verses that really did help bring me hope at that time. Psalm 130, verse 5, I wait for the Lord, my soul waits, and in his word I put my hope. And then Isaiah 49:23, then you will know that I am the Lord. Those who hope in me will not be disappointed. Well, in March, there was another new season that began, the chemotherapy infusion phase, which consisted of 8 chemo infusions over 16 weeks, one every other week. And Jay had a port placed in his chest to have the chemo. I think we've got a picture of him in the hospital bed. Yep. He was all happy, kind of. That was before the anesthesia started kicking in. But he would go in and receive infusion treatments every other week. And that first chemo treatment, I can say I was a complete wreck. The experience was so overwhelming. Right now, up until that point, everything was happening to him. He would go back to his radiation appointment. I wasn't there for that. I didn't see that. But just entering the room, all of the instructions, the nurse putting on what literally looks like a hazmat suit to administer the chemo. And these are the meds that they're putting in his body, but yet she's wearing a hazmat suit to make sure she doesn't get exposed to it. So it was just, all of that was overwhelming to me. The chemo chair that he had to sit in. Once the 2-hour infusion was over, he had to go home with a pump that would administer the rest of the chemo for another day and a half. And it was just all too much. The waiting in the room during that time while he sat in that chemo chair, it was a new chapter. Do we have the chemo chair? Oh, yeah. Yep. When May arrived, it felt like we could see the end, but it was still a long season of perseverance. I wanted to be there at every appointment so he wouldn't be there alone. And I was usually working for part of it, but sometimes we talked, but every time we were just waiting for, I'd like to say that we use the time, Leah, to practice our songs or to, sing some choruses, but we did not. There was just a tension in the air, and it was just hard because we just couldn't even believe that this was our reality. He'd, after each time, he'd get set up with his pump and get checked out, and it was just part of the workday for these amazing, amazing nurses at the infusion center. Oh, they were just amazing. And then we were sent on our way. We always waited for the chemo machine to have infusion complete. That was a magical time, a moment. We're like, yes. Many asked how I was doing, and many would ask, and I was so grateful for that. And it was always tricky to answer that question. Generally fine. I was doing fine. I tried very hard to keep it together in front of Jay and in front of everybody, but usually I would fall apart when I was by myself, and that was usually in my car. And the hospital near my office was near my office, so I didn't have a long drive. So I usually had to have a good cry. It's like I scheduled it. Like, I gotta have a good cry, pull it together, head into the office, smiling and fresh-faced, and tackle the demands of my job. And I had a short playlist that I would if I just needed to sit in God's presence, I would listen to the songs like The Goodness of God, that has just become such an anthem here at our church and certainly in our lives, or Firm Foundation. I just absolutely love the second verse of that song. It's, I've still got joy in chaos, and I've got the peace that makes no sense. So I won't be going under. I'm not held by my own strength, because I build my life on Jesus. He's never let me down. He's faithful in every season. So why would he fail now? He won't. During this time, I had lots of time to wonder and pray and worry and wait. There was no way for us to know all of this was actually working. Fighting the cancer, shrinking his tumor. During this time, many asked us if the doctors would check to see how it's going, if they would do like a mid-treatment scan to see is it shrinking, and the answer was no. They rescan when all of the treatments are done so that they get a true readout and allow the body to heal a bit so that the images can be clean. So we had to choose to believe, to trust, and to hope. And I was just and that was hard. It was hard to just know that we're not even going to know if this is all worth it for weeks later. But I was grateful to have survived the dark winter months. And the prayers were sustaining me. And it's amazing how the change of seasons, the longer days, the warmer weather can just brighten your outlook and give you renewed hope. Once June arrived, he only had 2 infusions left, but the effects of the chemo were definitely taking a toll on him. He took a break from the music team, but he's usually done this during the summer because of the busy season of his job. But really, it was all he could do to get through what he could do at work, and then come home, and he would just be kind of laying there for most of the evening. And this was a tough time for us, in all honesty. He came home each night exhausted and spent, very little energy, 0 conversation. I was also just mentally drained. I felt like I was juggling everything. Being his cheerleader and his PR person, along with being a supportive mom and helping him at Allen Alma's, and I had my own job too. I felt like I was mediocre at everything. And I also wasn't feeling just supported by him. And then, of course, I would feel guilty for feeling that way. I wasn't the one with cancer. He was. But there were these moments of just terse interactions that just heightened the tension in our world. The uncertainty of the future, the stress of the present. It was just all so much. But at one point, one night, we were both home, and Jay just looked at me, and there were tears filling his eyes. And he said, I know it's different. What you're going through is different than what I'm going through. But I couldn't do this without you. And so, it wasn't super flowery, but that's okay. It was an answer to prayers of not just me, but many, I would feel a connection and know that we were in it together. He finished his last chemo treatment at the end of June, and his siblings were there to celebrate with us and surprised him as he walked out of the cancer center for what we hoped would be the last time. So that was fun. That was a fun surprise for everybody. And then we continued to pray and hope and wait. Jeremiah 14:22 reads, do any of the worthless idols of the nation bring rain? Do the skies themselves send down showers? No, it is you, O Lord our God. Therefore, our hope is in you, for you are the one who does all of this. Ultimately, we did have a peace that God could absolutely heal him, but we were called to wait even more. But his doctor was not waiting. The medical system operates from what I coined as the zero hope perspective and got everything lined up and scheduled, assuming that surgery would be necessary. And surgery was on the books for Monday, September 11th. If he was going to have scans at the end of August, so if you're following the timeline, the end of June is when his last chemo happened, and then it wasn't until the end of August that he would get scanned again, and then if needed, surgery would be September 11th. So all this time was going on that we were just waiting. It could always be canceled if it wasn't necessary following the scan, but it was hard knowing that their assumption this whole time was that he's going to need surgery anyway. That was hard. And it was hard to be hopeful knowing, and because we did want a complete response. That was our prayer. And the waiting was maddening at times, quite honestly. Thoughts of what the future might look like consumed us, and they especially weighed heavily on Jay. And we just didn't know what was ahead of as we counted down the days to that ever-important scan. And we waited to see if all the pain he endured would actually result in healing. And Jay especially sensed some urgency about his future, and then that felt scary to me. And he wanted to create some lasting family memories now while he was feeling decent, kind of not going through anything, and while we were in this season of waiting. So at the end of July, he planned a last-minute, very quick vacation for the four of us to go to Colorado. We had never taken a summer vacation because it was always during the busiest time of Jay's job. So the fact that he felt the urgency to do this signaled that this was weighing on him, and so it was scary for me to know that that was important, that he wanted to have family time because, like, what are you thinking? And that was hard. But it was also just an amazing, quick little vacation. And we were grateful to be able to do it. We hiked up a mountain. We whitewater rafted. We witnessed God's creation in the mountains. It was a very special time together. But then, unfortunately, on our last night, we received some devastating news. Back home, our beloved family dog, our 11-year-old golden doodle Ruby, had passed away in her sleep. And we were shocked and heartbroken. I mean, it was a complete wreck. For those of you with family pets, you probably get this connection. It just felt like a gut punch. Like, having to break the news to Connor and Allie felt harder than really telling them that Jay had cancer. And if there was ever a time in the past year that I cried out in anger, it was like, I remember crying out, Lord, what are you doing? Haven't you given us enough to deal with? And I know, it's like I said, it's a family pet, but still, it's still hard when I think about it. In my deepest moments of fear and despair, I remember even pleading with God to please keep my kids safe, because I was thinking in my heart, what's next? So it was hard for me to understand why that happened, but I just have to trust that God in his infinite mercy and wisdom, which I believe wholeheartedly is sparing us and spared us from some deeper form of loss down the road. That's like a mercy in disguise. So then, the end of August finally came, scan day. And following the scan, we rejoiced with the results that the cancer had not spread anywhere else, was no longer in his lymph nodes, and his results even came back as a complete response to treatment in the lymph nodes. But the tumor itself, the results were not 100% conclusive. The report stated near complete response. Literally, it said that on the radiology report regarding the tumor. So according to the radiologist, the tumor had shrunk significantly from where it was, but there were still signs of reduced tumor showing up on the scan, but his doctor wasn't seeing it. So now what? The doctor wanted to get a follow-up opinion from the radiologist to confirm whether there was still, in fact, evidence of the tumor and that the surgery should proceed as scheduled. And that was a Friday afternoon of Labor Day weekend. We didn't hear back from the doctor before the end of the day, Friday. So once again, we were waiting all weekend to find out whether in a week later he would have surgery or not. And the following Tuesday, Jay's doctor did call. He had finally been able to connect with the radiologist who stood by what he saw. He said there was still likely a small amount of tumor present. Hence, surgery would be needed to remove it, and the surgery remained as scheduled for Monday, September 11th. So then we waited, we prayed for a smooth surgery, that they would be able to get all of the remaining tumor. We prayed for no complications. Sunday, September 10th. So for those of you who heard Jay's interview with Pastor Zach last fall, you know what happened on this day. But for those of you who weren't there, I'll share it again quickly. It was 11 a.m. on a Sunday, and it was an hour before Jay had to start prepping for the surgery. And the same kind of prep you would do for a colonoscopy, so it's like all timed out. Jay gets a call from his doctor, and his doctor is sick with COVID and can't do the surgery. This is this doctor that's been part of his care the entire time, the one that Jay trusted. But he had another surgeon lined up, though. But it's a surgeon we have never met during this entire process, so we were faced with a choice: have a stranger perform this major surgery or wait for his doctor to get better. And if we waited, the doctor wasn't sure when it could be rescheduled. And then if you wait, you start to have new risks. His last chemo treatment was in June. So then if there is still cancer, what if it starts growing again? So there was this frantic research online to try and read reviews about this new doctor. There were pros and cons to discuss about timing and recovery and how that would impact the fall. And in the meantime, one of his captains called and said that the biggest boat at Allen Alma's wouldn't start, and it's full of people ready to do the Sunday brunch cruise, and could he come and fix it? So all of this stuff is happening, and so he drives away to go handle the work emergency. And I'm sitting there just in disbelief, like looking at the calendar on my phone and trying to see when it would work to have this surgery rescheduled. And I'm just starting to look at it, and all of a sudden I'm just prompted, like these words just so clearly come into my mind that I just know are from God. And this is what I texted Jay. I said, maybe you need to hear this. God told me this: don't put your faith in people. Don't put your faith in doctors, in dates, in timing, in schedules, in seasons. Put your faith in me. Give up trying to control all of your circumstances. I've got this, God. So, were we going to put our hope in things that we were trying to control? Or were we going to trust that God has the best plans for us? So, after prayer and then some really good phone calls with both his current doctor and the new doctor, Jay felt a peace about it and about proceeding, and the surgery date remained scheduled for the next day, September 11th, Monday. That was a long day. But again, I felt this peace that makes no sense, and I know it was because of everybody that was praying for us. And I felt God's presence throughout all of it, and I just give full credit to the faithful prayers of this community. It was not anything that we were doing. It was just prayers sustaining us from friends and family and everybody here. We started the day very early, and right before Jay was to be taken back, his nurse anesthetist led us all in a prayer, and it was just amazing. And then Jay's parting words to me as they were getting ready to wheel him away were, think about our best days together. Think about our favorite days. Just think about those. I had 8 long hours to think about them. So here's a photo before he got wheeled back. Yeah. But once again, I just felt supported. Visits from dear friends started out the day, and then a walk with my sister-in-law, and then an amazing God-orchestrated visit with a church friend who was also a nurse who happened to be there on that day, and she was on her lunch break. And we sat outside in the sun, and she explained that her brother had just gone through a similar surgery over 20 years ago. She shared about his life and family and just painted a picture about, everything's going to be okay. And it just was the reassurance I needed. It was truly like God was saying, God put her in my path for me to hear through her. See, I've got this. It's going to be okay. And so, just a PSA for the nurses out there. You have the unique opportunity to minister to people even when you're not actually administering medicine. You are just, it's amazing. And so then 2 days later, we received wonderful news. The confirmation of pathology that yes, there had been a small amount of the cancerous tumor still there, but they were able to get all of it with favorable margins. Jay was indeed cancer-free. Yay. And as I wrote in my journal that night, I think, I wrote, it's like finally opening the blinds in a dark room to reveal that outside is full of light. It's been daytime the entire time. We just couldn't see it in the dark place that we were in, but now we could see and picture the future. So while in one sense the waiting was over, in reality, our season of waiting will last the rest of our lives here. Waiting for the next clear scan, for news of a routine colonoscopy, for that 1 year mark, for the 5 year mark. All we can do, we will be waiting. All we can do is just keep asking for the strength to get through that day and for bright hope for tomorrow. And to not just believe in God, but actually believe God and know and trust that He does have the best plans for us. He is a God of hope. He wants to give us a hope, even in the waiting. And that what God promised is absolutely true, that He will love us with a perfect love, the kind of love that I'm mentioned in 1 John 4:18 that drives out fear. So this winter, as I mentioned, it's great to be on this side and to flip the calendar to 2024. And as I had mentioned in the beginning of my talk, I was working as a VP of marketing for a local marketing consulting firm. It felt like it was the right step in my career, but following Jay's surgery, I had really become just convicted. You go through this and your perspective changes on everything, on time and what you're doing with it. And also, I had just learned with every other area of our lives that we needed to hold on to the things of this world very loosely. That includes jobs, job titles, salaries. So this past fall, I started praying on my way to work and even holding out my hands, literally as I prayed, one hand on the wheel. As I prayed, a symbolic, just surrendering my job and everything that goes with it to the Lord. Show me where you want to use me. That was my prayer. And that was difficult for me to do because I'm a planner, I'm an organizer. I had plotted this out, that this was going to be this was the job that was right for me at this point. And it was scary because I'm thinking, okay, God, I'm praying this, and what if you actually answer? And what does that even look like? But once again, God was faithful to provide an answer in His own perfect timing, as hard as it was to receive. In early January, just due to a sluggish economy last fall and a couple of down quarters, I was let go from my job in early January. But because I had been surrendering this job every morning on my way to work, I just felt that peace that makes no sense. It should not have made sense, but I just had a peace about it. But it still did sting a little because no one likes to be cut from the team, right? And you feel that. But on my last day, as I opened the trunk of my car to put the stuff away that I was literally carrying from my office, I saw the posters that were still in my trunk from June on Jay's last day of chemo. And it was like, God was just providing that as a reminder. Like, it's all about perspective. It's not about offices or titles or roles or jobs. And when I got home, I started unpacking that box, the official box of your office stuff that has like the hand lotion, your office sweater. And that sign was the first thing that came out of the box. And it was my hope sign that I had brought to the office to remind me every day to keep the hope while I was waiting. So this is the first time in my adult life that I have not really known my next move, but God does. And so I find myself in a waiting of hope once again to see what doors God will open. We can make our plans, but the Lord determines our steps, as we're reminded from Proverbs 16:9. And we recently welcomed Rosie into our family, and she has been a welcome addition to help liven things up. Yep. Liven things up is one way of putting it, I guess, around our home this fall and winter. So, as I wrap up, I know that there are some of you that are still in a season of waiting. Your season didn't wrap up nicely in a 12-month period. You're still in it, or maybe you've been in it. You've been in it for many years. And I see you, and I feel that, and my heart is with you. And all I can do is encourage you and say that we can choose to wait in impatience or in bitterness or in anger or in self-pity and ask, why me? Why this? Or we can choose to wait in hope and believe that God is working and that he is with us and he will never leave us or forsake us and that he does have the best plans for us and that he does love us with a perfect love that can cast out fear. And he's asking for us to trust him. Are we going to believe that? For us, we learned that there was no way we could get through this, that we were going to be able to figure it